Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of I Didn't Sign Up for This. And we are just about ready to start talking about all of the stuff that we didn't sign up for. Carrie, let's go.
All right. So I have a question for you tonight. You ready?
Yep.
Have you ever been in a debate or a discussion or maybe even an argument, and the person that you're engaged with in this scenario makes a good point, and you go in your mind in that moment, whether it's a heated argument or heated discussion, you go, that makes sense. But then something steps in, I would like to call it pride, and you refuse to back down. Even though you can hear the point or perspective of the other person that you're arguing with, and this might be a person that you love or you care for or you respect, but there's no way in hell that they're going to be right over you being right. Have you ever had that happen?
I have never done anything even remotely close to that, and I am insulted that you would make that assumption. I mean, where have you been getting this?
Well, luckily, I have had that scenario multiple times in my life. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. So excluding you, I would venture to say that a lot of people have had that pride step in, or that ego, or that I'll be damned if they're going to prove me wrong, even though they're probably right. So it kind of boils down to this. There are a lot of situations and a lot of scenarios in our lives where we have the opportunity to be right or happy. And that's what I think we should talk about tonight.
Yeah, excellent. I do believe that is a very common choice that people make. But I assume most people just kind of want to be right, regardless of the situation. Very few people that I encounter will have the insights to stop, back up, and say, does this get me closer to what I actually want?
That's fair.
Does this get me closer to happiness? Because most people, I think, and maybe I'm assuming too much, but I think most people don't back up and say, am I getting closer to what I actually want? Am I getting happier by virtue of these decisions? They just want to absolutely be right all the time.
Well, and so there's an issue there. Because relationships with other people, regardless of the caliber of the relationship, it takes compromise over being right all the time. Now, I will tell you some of the happiest people that I know, they concede to compromise. They understand that it's not about being right. Some of the most correct people I know are some of the most miserable people I know, because they're standing on their pedestal being right. And you have to wonder what you get out of being right versus finding a common ground and developing an opportunity to have a partnership and being happy. I mean, me, for one, I love being right. But I will concede when I'm wrong, and I will admit it when I'm wrong. I've done that multiple times, even recently. But my goal is to be happy, and that requires a slight need, at least, to compromise and let somebody else take the stage every once in a while.
I get that. And I do the same thing. I probably take it too far, though. I have a number of friends, one in particular, that cannot remember, to save his life, how many times he's told me the same joke that he loved. And each and every time that joke gets queued up and it's coming down the pipe, and I know it's coming, and I've heard it before, and I know the punchline, and I want to just kind of shake my head, cut him off short, and say, yeah, and the blah, blah, blah. And then the nun says, whatever, right? But I tell you what, I don't do it. And the reason I don't do it is because he gets to feel good by telling me that joke. He gets to believe that he was this uplifting force in my life, even if it was for a few seconds of laughter around this same tired old joke. And it's not just the joke. I mean, there are a lot of things in life that are very similar to that, I think. A lot of things where it's better, I think, just to sit back and allow someone to explain something to you or think they're right or be entertaining. I'm a big fan in situations like this of the good old Socratic methodology, meaning I just ask a series of qualifying and clarifying questions to establish where someone stands and allow them to keep explaining themselves. Because I find that even when someone is astray, by my estimation, and I mean, I'm not right all the time, of course, but when someone's astray by my estimation, I don't agree with the perspective they have or the direction they're coming from. I find that if I just keep qualifying and clarifying their point long enough, pretty soon they'll come around to a different way of thinking.
So is it a thought process that is based on self-discovery and it's an evolution of thought?
Well, I think it's more just giving someone the opportunity to really establish how they feel about a given topic or in a given situation, or maybe about a given solution. Just to stop and say, okay, so this guy cut you off on the freeway and so you want to run him off the road. Yes, I do. And then it's just like, okay, so are there any inherent risks in running him off the road? Well, I mean, I guess I could get arrested. Yeah, anything else? Our bumpers could become entangled and throw me off the road as well. Yeah, that's a good point. That could happen. Anything else come to mind? And just like I keep clarifying and qualifying until someone either talks themselves deeper into something or completely out of it.
That makes sense. I think, there's satisfaction in being correct. There's satisfaction in being right. But it's not as self-serving as we would like for it to be. Because if you ever met somebody and tried to interact with someone who's always right, and no matter, I mean, come on, it's like beating your head against a brick wall. And the last thing you want to do is overexpose yourself to someone who is right all the time, because regardless of what the perspective that you bring to the table or what you want to share or your experiences that you have to build on, you're going to be wrong because they're always right. And they're very vocal about how wrong you are and how right they are. And it's unfortunate because it's actually, and I haven't really been able to peg, is it a defense mechanism? Is it an ego-driven thing? Is it an insecurity thing? So am I trying to prove that I'm always right because of an underlying insecurity?
I think that generally people are, in fact, trying to prove themselves right simply because they are afraid they might be wrong.
Oh, explain that. Yeah.
When someone is not afraid that they might be wrong, they don't care to prove anything to you at all. One of my favorite catch lines with a client I worked with years ago now, and every time I would see this individual, because he suffered with this malady, if that's what it is, every time I would see him, I would ask him, what is it going to take for me to convince you that I have nothing to prove?
It's the difference in if I'm right all the time, and I know someone, I've interacted with someone on a regular basis over the last few years who always has that story that's going to top yours or is always right. And I think in his case, it's built on insecurity. If you're sitting in an office and this person comes up and you start a conversation and you start sharing things about yourself and they're like, well, I've got one on that. Hold on. I'm going to share this with you. I've done that, but better. Or I've done that, but more correctly than you ever could. I mean, it's almost an insulting thing, even for a confident person to completely hear that. You immediately want to close down and go the other way. So there's no longer a collaboration in the relationship. There's someone who talks at you and you are appeasing them until you can get out the door. I've been to more than a few parties in my time where all of a sudden you're cornered by this person that has story after story and you're like, hey, A little help? Hey, anybody want to help me out here? And that happens. I mean, and that's, that's kind of a funny spin on a very real thing. But how does that damage your relationship with other people? If you're that person, if you're that guy or that girl that is always right, how does that hurt you?
Well, I mean, it does hurt you. I think you're right. It does hurt you. It hurts you in the sense that if you were always right, it is incumbent upon you always knowing everything, and you are therefore the world's foremost authority on everything. Being the world's foremost authority on everything, right? I can't pour water into a cup that is already full. The water will simply come out the top. And so if you are that vessel that is already full, completely full, then there is a lot that you sacrifice in terms of opportunities, friends, relationships, learning opportunities, jobs, promotions, just life in itself. If you are so deeply ingrained in your belief system and in your paradigms, then you have precious little to be gained by engaging with anyone else ever. And so what are you ever going to learn or change? What are you ever going to improve about yourself?
And the truth is the people that come to you and they want to share their life experience or everybody has a story, and we love telling stories. Everybody does. And everybody wants the world to see their perspective. So if you're dealing with someone who is always right and you really feel like you have no contribution to give, it's almost a waste of time to share what's going on with you or your perspective. Or, if I come home and I'm like, babe, I had the best day today. I really nailed this project at work and it was fantastic. Well, guess what? I did something better and here's my story. And you discount my sharing and my opportunity to open up and collaborate and be excited with you. I'm going to close off. There's a part of me that will close off. And that's detrimental to the relationships that you have in your life.
Sure it is. Absolutely it is. But at the same time, you've also got to be that for someone else. But there are a lot of people out there who don't understand the social cues and the social norms relative to giving and receiving and life being a two-way street. And you don't, somebody's always got a story. Somebody's always got something to, like you say, one up. I used to call it competitive complaining because every time something unfortunate would happen in the people's lives around this person, that person could dig deep and come up with something that was just outrageously worse, as though you're making someone feel better about how minuscule their problems are. And I can tell you, the last thing you ever want to do with someone is dismiss their problems or concerns or issues, right? You can, in fact, share with them through questioning and reasoning the notion that maybe it's not as bad as they think it is. But that is kind of a long and delicate process. You don't want to come into someone in any conversation who just had the worst day ever and tell them, oh, no, you didn't. It wasn't that bad. Why, children in Ethiopia are starving to death, right? Nobody wants to hear that. And you will alienate people. That's the thing, is that people have freedom of choice. They will simply, like you said, shut down. And they'll stop hanging around you. They'll stop taking your phone calls. They'll stop engaging with you in your life. And that's where the limits start to hit you. Because you know everything. You're the world's foremost authority on absolutely everything. And people feel unvalidated, I guess. They don't feel good about themselves because they can't ever have a problem that you don't one up, and they can't ever have a success that you don't one up. And so we just don't want to be engaged with that person on any level.
It's detrimental to your mode of communication or your form of communication, because I shut down in those scenarios. And I'm not a shy person. I'm not somebody who sits in the corner. I get out there and I mingle and I talk. But if I come face to face with someone who is always right or who always has a better story, or if I go to share part of myself or my experiences and you're kind of slapped in the face with that, oh, you don't even know how bad you had it. I had it 20 times worse than you did. And that whole that whole scenario, which, you know, is kind of in the gray of being right versus happy, because it all falls into one bucket, in my opinion. It's all about, you know, do you compromise? Do you respect each other? Do you respect your experiences? And do you build on those? Or is it really a competition?
And there are a lot of people out there who believe that it is really a competition. Well, and the thing is, they think they're doing you a favor, right? It's like, you know, I've got a hangnail. Well, I cut my whole toe off. Oh, okay.
You win.
But here, you win. Whatever you won, right? I'm glad they were able to reattach your toe or whatever. Maybe they didn't. I've never seen your feet. Hopefully I never do. But that does not mitigate the pain associated with my hangnail, right? It doesn't. It doesn't do me any good. Whereas to take, through that delicate process to go into someone and say, I'm really sorry. I imagine that hurts. How do you walk around? How do you get from place to place at work or get the things done that you need to do? Is there anything I can do to help mitigate the pain? Are there analgesics, something you could take? And I'm sure you've already thought of that, but I'd like to be able to help, which leads into, different things that can be done to potentially mitigate. The first thing you do is validate. The second thing you do is offer help that you may or may not be available to give, meaning I'm no expert, but my mom used to do a tub of hot water with Epsom salt, and that would kind of draw things out a little bit, right? So that I'm just offering opportunities. And believe it or not, eventually you can get into how you lost your whole toe, right? And leave that person feeling grateful that they didn't lose their toe. But you just can't start at the end with these people.
With those people who are always right. Little do they know we're right too. No, I think that when you're dealing with a partnership, whether it be romantic or otherwise, if you have two people that insist that they're always right, you miss out on so many opportunities to be happy. Now, on the flip side of that, I don't believe that ignorance is bliss. I believe that it's okay to be curious, it's okay to collaborate, it's okay to compromise. But ultimately, your happiness is something that you own and something that you control. So no one else can make you happy, just like no one else can detract from your happiness. And so happiness is completely separate from the relationships that you have. Now, there are people that you may have in your life that can add to your happiness. But if you are not happy with yourself, then it doesn't matter what the relationships are that you have. So that's a building block of true happiness and true joy, is self-acceptance and self-love and being able to build from that. In addition to that, there takes an aspect of compromise in every situation. I mean, we compromise when we're standing in line. We're giving up our time to wait in line to pay for something because what we want is more important than our time in that moment. And so there's compromise in everything we do, from a grocery line to waiting for the gas pump to, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with this person. And in order to do that, we need to see eye to eye as opposed to one-upping each other. And so the payoff is kind of where I want to land, because there's self-satisfaction in being right and being just. But there's more satisfaction in being happy. And the two don't necessarily see eye to eye. They don't go hand in hand if you're unwilling to let somebody else be right sometimes.
Well, I think it comes down to understanding the difference between confidence, which is I'm pretty confident that I'm right about a given scenario or situation, and arrogance, which is to say, I am confident and you must agree with me. Because confidence is just confidence. Arrogance has to be right all the time.
Gotcha.
Arrogance has to prove itself. Whereas confidence just believes what it believes and will allow you to come to the same conclusion given enough time or experience or input from other people or scenarios, whatever. you'll come around to my way of thinking eventually. So it's not really all that crucial that you agree with me right here and right now. Whereas the arrogant person says, I am right, and you will admit that I am right.
Gotcha. So it's an element of control. It's, I want to be in control. I want to run the show, and you need to bend to my perspective in order for us to get along. I mean, is that what we're saying?
Well, I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. But I think there are people that do it mean well. I've heard it said before that the worst thing you can say about someone is that they mean well, right? It's the greatest insult in the world is, well, yeah. Bless his heart, he means well. I remember, this line from Andy Griffith where Andy's talking to Gomer and he says, Gomer, have you ever heard of a blithering idiot? It's like, yes. Well, you're blithering. And I love that line. But yeah, the blitherer means well. He thinks he's doing you a big favor by correcting you on your misheld beliefs or your issues or problems that he or she has very quick to identify and sort of, armchair psychology out of you. But at the same time, what people want, well, it goes back to what I said before. What people want more than anything, believe it or not, more than to be happy, is to be validated, to be told that they are important. And so someone doesn't have to be held up as being absolutely right all the time. Okay, so you've got that person who wants to be right all the time. That person who says, actually, and actually is my least favorite word in the world, because actually means you're wrong, right? There is not a single situation that I have ever come across in my life wherein you couldn't replace the word actually with you're wrong. And so I hate the word actually. I used to forbid the sales guys on the sales floor from even using the word actually when they were on the phone with prospects and clients and what have you. Because nobody's wrong. Everybody's perfectly right from their own perspective. People go in and work to assert their rightness, their correctness from whatever perspective or whatever angle, not because they necessarily need to be right, but because they need to feel important. They need to be validated. And so you can be incorrect about something, and I still love you and respect you and hold you in high esteem. I just don't agree with you on this part, and let's see if you can convince me otherwise. But I hope you're open to the notion that maybe you also are astray, and I can bring you back onto the path. And maybe we meet in the middle.
Well,
but it's all about personal validation.
And that makes sense to me. I think you're right.
What you should have said was look down your nose and say, well, actually.
No, I do. I agree with you. I think that we live in a world where everyone has an opinion and everybody has a perspective. And the minute that you try to convince others of your perspective that isn't founded on their experiences, but somehow they're supposed to base it on your experiences and just trust that you are right, I think we discount the experiences that we all bring to the table. And, there are tons of articles out there, mostly in relationship blogs, of basically the gist of it is you can be right or you can be happy in a relationship. You need to pick. And this is not about integrity. It's not about being just. It's about being able to come to a table and share experiences and common ground. And it's okay that we don't all agree. Like, life is not cookie cutter. Our experiences are totally different. We may disagree. We may not see eye to eye. But ultimately, it's not my place to tell you what you believe or what you think. It's okay to talk and to go through the different points of view and to respect each other. And for me, I know that you know this, but I'm big on respect. Respect is more important to me than anything else. I want to be respected. And when I'm dealing with someone who insists that they're right and ultimately I'm wrong in everything, or I don't feel like I have a voice, I look at that as something that's disrespectful. And maybe not everybody sees it that way, but that's how it impacts me, where I have had the opportunity in business to sit down with people who are absolutely brilliant, and they would allow me, the people that I have responded best to, that have been the most impactful mentors in my life, they would allow me to self-discover and get to the conclusion on my own. They may have been there 5 years before me. So it's not about I'm right, you're wrong, and, get out of my office. It's about, well, tell me why you feel that way, and tell me about these experiences, and tell me about this. And then ultimately, if there is a truth is a truth. It's undeniable. Truth is unchanging, but our perspectives will change. And so if there is a truth that I need to get to, the people who have been most impactful in my life have allowed me to get to that truth without forcing it on me. And that's respectful. So you can disagree. You don't necessarily have to agree on everything all the time. But the mutual respect is required, and that ultimately will lead to happiness.
I agree, absent the fact that you will in life find that odd duck who is so insecure and so suffering for personal validation that he or she will in fact insist upon being right and you being wrong, and ask you to admit that you are in fact wrong. You're wrong about how you feel. Here's why. And so, but I think the overwhelming majority of the time, if you will, as you pointed out, in different words, use that Socratic methodology of qualifying and clarifying, letting people walk down their own path. And not everybody needs that, granted. Thankfully, not everybody needs that. There are a lot of people who will, in fact, take it at face value and just trust you. I've walked this path. I don't know the best way to accomplish this, but I do know a way that works. You should do this. And there are a lot of people who will go, okay, if that worked for you, then that's what I'm going to do. And there are a lot of people who have to define it for themselves. They have to prove themselves right or wrong. And that's when you have to fall back to that Socratic methodology of, tell me more about that. Why do you feel that way? How have you come to these conclusions? Walk me through the math just so that I understand it. And if you let people do that long enough, and you are in fact right about that thing that you're confident about, that you've experienced, they'll come around to your way. They absolutely will. And if they don't, could be you're wrong. Could be they found a better way to accomplish the thing that you went through as well. And it could be that they're just the odd duck.
Well, that's true. And that's a completely, those people that are insecure, I mean, maybe we should do a podcast on overcoming insecurity, because I do believe that insecurity drives a lot of that. And it can damage the relationships that you have with people. But I think that there's also a base. Now, I'm going to admit something about myself. I am very black or white. I'm black or white. And it's just part of who I am. And as I've gotten older and I've been through experiences, I had to teach myself to live in the gray, because that's where the emotion is. Black or white is absolute, but the gray allows for abundance. It allows for productivity. It allows for creativity, for exploration. And so being absolute in nature, And I struggle with it quite often because it's either all or nothing for me. And although that will make me successful if it's all or nothing in a business scenario or a business situation, it has to be gray in the relationships that you cultivate with people. And gray is the place to be because you get both perspectives. You get a full spectrum of truth and a full spectrum of realization and acceptance and love and all of these wonderful things that life has to give you, and life has to provide the growth and the experience for you. And it's interesting because that's where faith is. If it's either black or white, it's absolute. There's no faith required. There's no growth required. But if you're in that gray area, it is required on both ends of the spectrum. You may swing more towards the black side sometimes, more towards the white side sometimes. But as long as you're in that gray, you have the capacity to embrace so much more. And I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense in my world. And there are times where I am so on one side or the other, and I have to literally say to myself, Carrie, get in the gray. You got to get in the gray. Because life is not absolute. If it was absolute, we would be able to chart out our path and we would be little robots walking down this path and doing everything that we were supposed to do in the time we were supposed to do it. We wouldn't fall. We wouldn't skin our knees. We wouldn't cry. We wouldn't laugh. We wouldn't have all these amazing experiences that life has to offer us because we'd just be charting down this little path that we planned out with no obstacle, with no growth opportunity. And so if I'm always right and I'm in the black or the white of everything, there is no opportunity for me to let go of being right and experience something that just might be outside of my scope of thought.
I agree.
Well, then we're both right.
I think that there are precious few times in life where it's all black or it's all white is appropriate, even desirable. But the overwhelming majority of experiences and interactions you're going to have with people on this planet fall into the gray because, quite simply, everyone is having their own experience with their own perspective, as you said just a moment ago. I don't know what brought you to this conclusion. I don't know what has weighed your opinion over the course of perhaps a lifetime of paradigms and decisions and assumptions. And without that, I can't possibly know who's right and who's wrong. Given your situation, spending a lifetime in your shoes, I may well make exactly the same decisions that you have made. I may well think exactly the same way that you think about everything from religion to politics to people to everything. But I don't know, and there's no way I possibly can know. And so I have to give you the benefit of the doubt and invite you to talk through the cognitive process with me for no other reason than I want to understand how you've come to this conclusion and why you were making these decisions.
Well, that makes sense. You can look at the opportunity that we have for happiness, and a lot of it boils down to thinking of yourself less than you think of other people in your life. There is true happiness in that. And I don't mean be self-sacrificing and put yourself and your desires and your thoughts aside. I mean, really care and think about others more than you think about yourself. So if you tie that into the being right versus being happy, let somebody else take the lead every once in a while. You know, let someone else explore their self-esteem and their thoughts and bring their scenarios and their contribution to the table. Because we love ourselves, right? We look at things and how they impact us the majority of the time. And it may take a stretch to step outside of that and respect the other people and their perspective. It's just like a mother and a child, or a father and a child. When a child is learning to walk, you don't stand them up and do it for them. You allow them to explore the process so that they can grow and learn to walk from their own experience. And it's very similar to that for all of us. I want to develop my own thoughts and my own experiences and explore my own emotions. And I wouldn't want someone to tell me that I'm wrong in doing that. And so it's really moving beyond how I feel about everything versus let's share how we feel about different things. And it also allows for more fun. It allows for more collaboration. I will tell you that the majority of the relationships that I have seen, and I've had the opportunity to do some relationship coaching and life coaching, the majority of the relationships that I have seen that have needed that coaching or that intervention is when one always felt they were right above the other one. And so one of the strategies that I used in relationship coaching is I will meet with each one of them individually and explore what they want as individuals before I ever bring them together and coach them together. Because it is about our individual experience. Relationships come into play when we explore how we can take our individuality and build off of each other. And so your impact, or the relationships that you have with other people, they have to take a back seat to the relationship that you have with yourself, or you will never succeed in those relationships. And that's a hard concept, because there is a particular couple that I worked with where I told them that I wanted to meet with them individually, and they didn't understand why I would want to do that. But I met with each of them individually, and then the second session I brought them in together, and the difference in the delivery and the sharing and the opportunity to explore who they are as people and how they complement each other was severely damaged when I brought them in together, because they hadn't taken the time to explore the individual side. And, that's part of the reason you don't want to get married when you're 17. I mean, from the time you're 17 to the time you're 28, you evolve into a completely different person. So you have to allow for self-love and individuality in order to have a progressive relationship. And I feel like that's a part that people miss out on, because everybody's dying to fall in love. Everybody's, running out the door to run down the aisle. And if you can't love yourself first, then you may always be that insecure person that has something to prove. It may always be absolute, and you'll alienate the people in your life.
So what then do you do about the person who does not know when to compromise or adjust or throw in the towel? And I relate it back to, oddly enough, to people that I've worked with over the years in the trading field, in trading, stocks, options, currencies, that sort of thing. I relate it back to that because I've seen so many people who will look at a technical indicator, and that candlestick is a doji, which means there's got to be a reversal, and the stochastics say that this thing is overbought, and every indicator says it's got to go down. So no need to set a stop loss. Let's just jump in and short this thing. And it goes up, and it continues to go up. And people will hold on to a given financial instrument to the point that they lose twice or 3 or 10 times as much money as they should have, because they're so convinced that they are right. And ultimately they are right, but they're not right soon enough to keep from going bankrupt, right? That's right. You got it right. If you had only waited 2 years or whatever, then you'd be a millionaire. As it stands, welcome to Walmart, right? And it's just like, all right, People who don't know when to throw in the towel, don't know when to cash in their chips, don't know when to execute that compromise. What do you do with those people?
Well, you have to understand that in a coaching perspective, not everybody's coachable. And sometimes it actually takes the person that they care about the most to sit down and talk them through the impact of what they're doing. I have a friend who, in her relationship with her husband, I'm impressed by her ability to value his contribution to their relationship and still be able to balance her perspective and get the point across. And the relationship that they have and the closeness that they have is evident by her ability to deliver that. And I've seen her do it multiple times throughout the years where he may get off on a tangent and he may go into a scenario or a situation, and she will always value his input and where he's coming from and then share her thought. So when you're dealing with someone who feels like they're always right, the best thing that you can do is pause and validate them. And allow them that moment of validation, because what that will do is it will feed into their security, and they will let down this defense mechanism that they have and be more open. And in turn, you will get a more authentic version of that person that you're interacting with. And so truly appreciating their perspective and where they're coming from, because anytime that you're dismissive or you are defensive, you're immediately going to increase the barrier that you have with them. And this is true for any conflict or any situation or any scenario. You really have to value the people that make a contribution. You may not see the value in the contribution, but you should see the value in the attempt. And I think that if you can put ego aside, the ability to do that will be far greater. And the payoff is amazing. Not only have I made you feel good about your perspective and your experience and where you're coming from, but we are now collaborating on a thought process as opposed to going head to head and toe to toe. So my recommendation is absolutely validate the perspective, because just like you don't necessarily want to deal with someone who is always right, no one wants to be told that they're constantly wrong. So is there a right or wrong if it's all different perspectives that vary based on experience? I would venture to say that there is no right or wrong. It's all perspective. It's all perception of the situation. So it's not about black or white, right or wrong. It's about gray and compromise. And until we can live in that space, we will struggle with interpersonal relationships fairly consistently. It's the people who show acceptance and love and respect and validation that win the prize every time. So you have to set selfishness and ego aside, because if you're always wrong, so if you're one of those people who insists on being right, but I am always telling you that you're wrong, by default, I'm that person to you who's always right. And so appreciate each other, appreciate the perspective. You may not agree with it. It might not be enough to build a solid foundation for a relationship, but that's something that you have to analyze and you have to inspect as you're going through it. But ultimately, there has to be that genuine intent and that gratitude for each other. And just like you would want that back. All I know is there are a lot more articles in this world about how to be happy versus how to be right. And so the focus and the intent is that we're happy. And happiness has to come from inside of ourselves. And we have to be able to explore what happiness is and whatever that takes. But just like I want to be happy, Tim, you have the right to be happy. And everybody in this world deserves to be happy, truly happy. And so that takes a mutual collaboration with all of the people that impact your life. I once talked to someone and I gave them advice on their relationship. And what from my perspective and some of the different things that I learned when I was going through my life coaching certification about relationship coaching. And I explained the differences in men and women and how we think and how our thought processes are they're so different, but they so work together. And I think that from a relationship perspective, at least a romantic relationship, I think sometimes we fail to recognize that. You know, the worst thing that you can do is treat a man like a dysfunctional woman. And that was my point. I actually learned that in the Understanding Men seminar I went to years ago. I, as a woman, can't expect you to think like me. Just like you as a man cannot expect me to think like you. But together, it works for the most part. And so when you start projecting and you know, whatever relationship you have with someone, if it's with a man or a woman, you know, whatever your relationship, if you start projecting your perception onto the person that you're in a relationship with, it won't be long before there's a breakdown in communication, man or woman. And so it's vital to the progression of your own happiness to lean on each other and to collaborate and to build that foundation. So, I mean, obviously it's something near and dear to my heart. I personally would rather be happy than right. Fortunately, I'm both.
Good for you.
Of course I'm kidding. But I have seen in coaching sessions, or in meetings even, I have seen people shut down when a person is oppressively sharing their perspective as law or as, you know, the absolute. There are no absolutes in this life. If there were, I'd be absolutely rich and but there aren't any, and so you have to leverage that. Anyway, what do you think?
I think that what we're both saying is that it boils down to just loving your fellow person and giving that person credit for where credit is due, validating that person for their opinion, and understand that most of the time, unless that person just, you know, is not particularly mentally healthy, and that happens once in a while, unfortunately, but assuming that most are, 99% of the time, you're talking to somebody who's pretty well dialed in. They've come by the opinion that they hold honestly, best practices, and in good faith. And so it is not your place to go into that person and say, actually, or you're wrong. You can't do that. And so if you validate first, ask questions second, Socratic methodology, qualify and clarify and qualify and clarify, and they'll either make a case, in which case you can join their team, or they will uncover the weakness in their case, in which case they'll likely join yours. What you don't want to do is just compete.
That's true. There shouldn't be a competition in a healthy relationship. It should be a collaboration. You know, it's funny. When I was doing some research on this topic and kind of looking just to see what was out there, I typed in Google, I typed in the words, do you want to be right? And immediately one of the options that came up was, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? Well, I haven't quite decided
There
yet.
you
But there's some interesting articles out there. There's some interesting items that really help, but they all tie into empathy. They all tie into compassion. What if we lived in a world where everybody was right because they were basing their reality on their perception and their experience? Why does there have to be a right or wrong when it comes to the perspective that your partner or your coworker or your friend or your mother brings to the table? Because it's all based on different experiences.
And the key word there is perspective, because we do live in that world. That's a pretty good synopsis of exactly the world we live in. You either add to someone's perspective or they add to yours. And that's how we move forward in a collaborative world.
So really what it boils down to is respect for one another, empathy, and collaboration. Okay, I like it.
Okay, well, good. Well, it sounds like we've got another one done then.
Yes, we do. Good talk. That time flew by.
It usually does, doesn't it?
Well, and we're right. So
We're right. We're always right.
listen to us.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, if you have any questions or comments or concerns of any kind, we would love to hear from you. Just leave us a comment. Hit us up on Facebook at I Didn't Sign Up for This. And we will get back together and talk about a hopefully meaningful subject next time. Until then, dream your life
And live your dreams.
Okay, talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.